I turned 25 on a Thursday. My mom insisted we celebrate at the nicest restaurant in the city. That alone felt strange. My parents never spent money unless they absolutely had to. Growing up, I heard the same thing over and over: money doesn't grow on trees. We have sacrifices to make. We can't afford unnecessary things. Yet somehow, for my 25th birthday, they reserved a private dining room. My dad even called 3 times that week to make sure I'd be there. "Don't be late," he said. "It means a lot to your mother." The whole thing felt off, but I ignored the feeling. I wanted to believe they were finally trying. For years, I'd been the responsible daughter, the daughter who worked through college, the daughter who paid her own bills, the daughter who drove across town whenever they needed help. Meanwhile, my younger brother Ethan could do no wrong. If he crashed a car, Mom blamed the road. If he lost a job, Dad blamed the economy. If I made one tiny mistake, somehow it became a family discussion. I learned early that different rules applied to me. Still, they were my parents. At least that's what I thought. When I arrived at the restaurant, Mom was already waiting near the entrance. She hugged me tighter than usual, too tight, almost like she was nervous. Dad stood behind her with a forced smile. Ethan sat at the table scrolling through his phone. He barely looked up. Something about the room felt heavy. Everyone was pretending to be happy. No one actually was. Dinner started normally. Small talk, fake laughter, questions about work. Questions they already knew the answers to. Then I noticed something strange. Every time I spoke, Mom glanced at Dad. Every time Dad spoke, Ethan looked away. Like they were all waiting for something. Like this wasn't a birthday dinner at all. Halfway through the meal, my father cleared his throat. The room instantly went silent. My stomach tightened. I didn't know it yet, but in less than 10 minutes, everything I believed about my family was about to collapse. And the truth they'd hidden for 25 years was far worse than I could ever imagine. My father set down his glass, then folded his hands on the table. The room became painfully quiet. Even the sounds from the restaurant outside seemed distant. "Ava," he said, "there is something we've kept from you." I forced a smile. "What is this? Some birthday surprise?" No one laughed. My mother's eyes immediately filled with tears. That was when real fear hit me. My father took a deep breath. Then he said the words that shattered my world. "You're adopted." For a second, I honestly thought I heard him wrong. The words didn't register. I stared at him, waiting for him to smile, waiting for someone to say it was a joke. No one did. Ethan suddenly became very interested in his plate. Mom couldn't even look at me. My heart started pounding. "What?" My voice barely came out. Dad repeated it, slowly, coldly. "You're adopted." The room tilted. 25 years, 25 birthdays, 25 Christmas mornings, and now they were telling me. At a restaurant, in front of everyone, I looked at my mother. "Mom?" The word felt strange coming out. She wiped her eyes, then nodded. "It's true." The air left my lungs. I felt sick. Every childhood memory flashed through my head. Every time I felt different. Every time I wondered why I never quite fit in. Every time relatives treated me differently than Ethan. Suddenly everything made sense. But then something even worse happened. My father wasn't finished. "We didn't tell you because there was never a reason." Never a reason. I almost laughed. "No reason?" My hands were shaking. "You waited 25 years. Dad remained calm, too calm. Then he said something that changed the entire conversation. "There's another reason we invited you tonight." I froze. Mom started crying harder. Ethan still refused to look at me. And for the first time, I realized this dinner had been planned. Every second of it. The adoption revelation wasn't the main event. It was only the beginning. And whatever came next was the real reason they wanted me there. I stared at my father. My chest felt tight. Every instinct told me to stand up and leave. But I stayed. I needed answers. "What reason?" I asked. Dad exchanged a glance with Mom. Then he reached into a folder beside his chair. A folder. They had brought paperwork to my birthday dinner. My stomach dropped. He pulled out several documents and slid them across the table. I looked down. At first, nothing made sense. Then I saw my name. And underneath it, legal forms, property forms, inheritance forms. I frowned. "What is this?" Dad leaned back. His expression was completely emotionless. "Since you are not our biological child, we believe it's time to make some changes." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Mom started crying again, but she didn't stop him, not once. My fingers tightened around the papers. Dad continued. "The family assets will remain with Ethan." Ethan finally looked up, but he didn't seem surprised, not even a little. He already knew. The realization hit me like a truck. They had discussed this, planned it, prepared for it. Everyone at this table knew what was happening except me. "You knew?" I asked Ethan. He looked away. That was answer enough. My father pointed toward the documents. "We need your signature." I stared at him. "My signature?" "Yes. So you invite me to my birthday dinner?" I laughed bitterly. "Tell me I'm adopted, then hand me papers to sign away any claim to the family?" No one answered, because it was true. That was exactly what they had done. And as I looked around the table, I realized something. They expected me to break down, to cry, to beg. Instead, a small smile appeared on my face, because there was one thing they didn't know. One thing that would change everything before the night was over. I picked up the papers. Slowly, carefully, then I flipped through every page. My father seemed relieved. He probably thought I was about to sign. Mom finally spoke. "Ava, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Harder? I almost laughed. They had just destroyed 25 years of lies. And I was the one making things difficult? I looked at Ethan. He couldn't even meet my eyes. That hurt more than I expected. We grew up together. Shared birthdays, family vacations, late-night movies, and all this time he knew, the entire time. "You've known for years, haven't you?" I asked. Ethan swallowed, then nodded. The answer felt like a knife. Dad cleared his throat. "We've already discussed this as a family." As a family, the words echoed in my head. A family meeting, a decision, plan, and somehow I wasn't included. Funny considering the decision was about my life. I closed the folder. Then I smiled, a calm smile, the kind that made my father uncomfortable. His eyebrows pulled together. "What are you smiling about?" I leaned back in my chair. "Nothing." That was a lie, because at that exact moment my phone vibrated. Once, then again. A message appeared on the screen. 3 simple words: "We're here now." My heart skipped. I recognized the sender immediately. For months, I had been waiting for this moment. Months. While my parents thought they controlled the story, I had quietly learned the truth. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to know that tonight wasn't going to end the way they expected. I locked my phone, then looked toward the restaurant entrance. And the second I saw who had just walked in, I knew everything was about to change. The restaurant doors opened and a man and woman stepped inside. Both were dressed elegantly, confident, successful. They weren't looking around the room, they were looking directly at me. My father noticed them immediately. His face lost color. Mom froze. The woman smiled when our eyes met. A warm smile, one I'd never seen before, yet somehow it felt familiar. The man placed a hand on her shoulder. Then they started walking toward our table. Dad suddenly stood up. "What are they doing here?" His voice was sharp, panicked. The woman stopped beside me, then she spoke. "Ava." Just hearing my name from her felt strange. Like she'd said it 1,000 times before, I slowly stood. The entire table watched in silence. Mom's hands were shaking. Ethan looked completely confused. The woman reached into her purse and removed a small envelope. Then handed it to me. I already knew what was inside. But my parents didn't. I opened it anyway. Inside were copies of documents, birth records, DNA results, and one photograph. A photograph of a young woman holding a newborn baby. Me. My father's chair scraped loudly against the floor. "No." The word escaped his mouth before he could stop it. The man finally spoke. "Yes." His tone was calm, controlled, dangerously calm. The restaurant suddenly felt very small. I looked at the photo again, then at the woman standing beside me. The same eyes, the same smile, the same features, my biological mother. After 25 years, she was standing right in front of me. And judging by the terrified expressions on my parents' faces, this was exactly the moment they had hoped would never happen. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The silence was unbearable. My biological mother looked at me with tears in her eyes. Not dramatic tears, not forced tears, real ones. The kind people spend years trying to hold back. My father finally found his voice. "You need to leave." The man beside her smiled. "No," one word, calm, confident. My father hated it. The entire room had gone quiet. Even nearby tables were watching. My biological mother turned toward me. "Ava, there are things you deserve to know." Dad slammed his hand onto the table. "No," she ignored him, completely. Then she looked back at me. "We never abandoned you." The words hit me harder than the adoption reveal. I blinked. "What?" My parents exchanged terrified glances. For the first time all night, they looked scared, not angry, scared. The man opened a folder, a much thicker folder than the one sitting in front of my father. Inside were court records, Old letters, legal documents, and newspaper clippings. My biological mother took a shaky breath. When you were a baby, we were told you had died. The world stopped. I stared at her, certain I had misunderstood. Died? She nodded. We searched for answers for years. My hands started trembling. Years? Dad looked like he wanted to run. Mom buried her face in her hands, and suddenly a horrible thought entered my mind. A thought so awful I didn't even want to believe it. I slowly turned toward the people who had raised me. Then I asked the question neither of them wanted to hear. What exactly did you do? Neither of them answered, and that silence told me more than words ever could. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The silence was unbearable. My biological mother looked at me with tears in her eyes, not dramatic tears, not forced tears, real ones. The kind people spend years trying to hold back. My father finally found his voice. My father looked away. Mom kept crying. Neither answered. That was answer enough. My biological father placed another document on the table. A police investigation. My heart pounded. The case was buried years ago. Dad stood up. That's enough. No, I said. For the first time all night my voice was stronger than his. I opened the file. There were signatures, witness statements, and one familiar name, my father's. A chill ran through me. Years ago he had connections at the hospital where I was born. Someone falsified records. Someone reported me dead. Someone made sure my biological parents never found me. I slowly looked up. My father couldn't meet my eyes. At that moment I realized the people who raised me hadn't rescued me. They had stolen me. The restaurant erupted in whispers. People were openly staring now. My mother suddenly grabbed my hand. Ava, please. I pulled away. Don't. Her face crumbled. We loved you. The words hurt, because part of me believed them, but love wasn't enough. Not after the lies, not after tonight. My biological mother quietly handed me a small box. Inside were dozens of letters. Every birthday, every Christmas, every year. Letters they had written to me, letters I never received. Tears blurred my vision. For 25 years they had searched. For 25 years someone made sure I never knew, and sitting across from me were the people responsible. My father suddenly snapped. You think they're perfect? Everyone turned. They're only here because she's successful now. The room went silent. Successful. That word caught my attention. My biological father laughed. Interesting. Then he placed another document on the table. Business records, company records, investment records. My eyes widened. The company name was familiar, very familiar. I owned shares in it, a lot of shares. My biological parents weren't struggling. They were wealthy, extremely wealthy, and judging by my father's expression, he had known that for years. Suddenly everything made sense. The timing, the inheritance papers, the birthday dinner. This wasn't about family, it was about money. Dad's plan had been simple. Get me to sign, cut me out, keep everything, before I learned the truth, before I met my biological family, before I discovered what had been left for me. My biological father looked directly at him. You were afraid she'd find out. Nobody answered, because it was true. The inheritance documents weren't protecting Ethan. They were protecting them, protecting their control, their secrets, their lies, and now every piece of that plan was falling apart in public. My biological mother reached across the table. Ava, you don't have to decide anything tonight. I nodded. Then I looked at the papers my father wanted me to sign. Without saying a word, I tore them in half. The sound echoed through the room. My father went pale. Ethan stared in disbelief. For the first time, I felt free. No guilt, no fear, no obligation, just freedom. 25 years of manipulation ended with one rip of paper. Then Ethan surprised everyone. He stood up, looked at me, then looked at our parents. I didn't know all of this. Dad froze. Ethan shook his head. You told me she was adopted. His voice cracked. You never told me she was stolen. The room became silent again. Even Ethan was turning against them, for the first time. They had nobody left. Not me, not him, nobody. Security arrived, not because of my biological parents, because the restaurant manager had been informed about the investigation. My father started arguing, demanding, threatening. Nobody cared. Years of control were slipping away. My mother sat frozen, completely broken, and I felt something unexpected. Not happiness, not anger, just emptiness. The people I thought were my parents were strangers, and there was no fixing that. Outside the restaurant, my biological parents waited with me. No pressure, no demands, no expectations, just patience. Something I wasn't used to. My biological mother smiled through tears. We missed 25 years, I nodded. So let's not waste the next 25. She started crying again. This time so did I. For the first time that night, the future felt bigger than the past. 6 months later, the investigation was reopened. More evidence surfaced. More lies came out. My adoptive parents faced consequences they never expected. Ethan apologized. We slowly rebuilt our relationship. As for me, I got to know the family that had never stopped searching. The family that wrote letters every year. The family that never gave up. On my 26th birthday, we gathered around a table. No secrets. No manipulation. No lies, just family. My biological mother handed me a small gift. Inside was the very first letter she had written after losing me, 26 years old, and finally reading words meant for me since infancy. I looked around the room and smiled. People who tried to erase my story had failed, because in the end the truth found its way home.